My media magazine sticks to many media conventions of a typical indie magazine. This is shown throughout my magazine from the use of colours, layout, text and images that are used. One way that my media product used media conventions was the colour scheme of my work. For my magazine I used the colours red, black and white, and this kept to the house style of the magazine. This showing the media conventions of an indie magazine and would easily relate to the audience intended. I also showed the conventional use of a media product from the layout of my media magazine. I established these conventions by looking at other indie magazines such as NME and Q. The conventional style was shown throughout my whole magazine, especially the front cover. The front cover kept to the conventional style of the masthead being placed in the top left hand corner using the house style colours. Keeping to the conventional style, I also included a boost next to the masthead and a cell line at the bottom of the magazine, which continued to use the house style. The layout of my contents page also used typical media conventions by including the contents of the whole magazine on this page and using ideas from other media products that I'd looked at through my textual analysis research. My contents page also kept to the conventional style of a real indie magazine. I did this by including a main article with some detail of the double page spread. This allowed the audience to quickly know about what the main article was going to be about with only some detail. This also kept to the house style colours that I'd chosen for my magazine. I also kept the masthead of the magazine to the contents page, as I established from other magazine that this was a conventional style for the indie genre. I also kept the right side of the contents page to include other articles that are on the magazine, such as regular features. This kept a regular layout to the magazine that was a conventional style of other indie magazines that I had researched. My double page also used typical media conventions of an indie magazine such as NME by including an interview with the artist. I did this as I had established that typical indie magazines include interviews of the artist and was a regular feature of any magazine. As a feature to my magazine, I also included the date and page numbers of the magazine so it was easier for the reader to find the page and date that the article was on. This was consistent throughout my magazine and was a feature on every page. My front cover challenged media conventions by one of the artists not looking straight down into the camera. I chose to do this so that my magazine would stand out against other indie magazines when on a shelf. I also added the website of the magazine onto the front cover. This was done so that the audience could check the website for more information or for online subscriptions about the magazine. I also developed conventions of a typical magazine on my contents page. I did this by only including a brief description of the article and page numbers on the left hand side. I did this so that it created a mystery about the articles when read, but also made the audience want to find out about the article as the information was not included. This engaged the audience more towards my magazine. I also developed the conventional form of a indie magazine by using different imagery on my double page spread. I continued with the use of the same person throughout my magazine, but changed the layout on my double page spread. This attracted and engaged the audience towards my magazine. I also challenged media conventions by having the same person on the same image twice. This gave the magazine a different look to the magazine that made it unique to others. I decided not to address the audience so that they would want to read the magazine and find out about the artist. My double page spread challenged typical media conventions by using two different images on the same photo. I also didn't have the artist looking into the camera in any picture on the page. This challenged the conventions as I established that most indie magazines have the artist looking into the camera to create a relationship with the reader. I did this to create a mystery towards the audience, which made them want to read the article that was with the images. I chose to challenge typical media conventions on the double page spread as I wanted to create mystery about the artist and make them want to read the article and answer their questions. Question 2. My media product represents the younger indie social group by including up-to-date information and artists which the younger group of people would like to know about. I also chose to include younger artists so that it would appeal to my target audience more, as my target audience was teenagers. This also represents the indie genre by the clothing that the two main artists are wearing. This allows the particular social group to know who the magazine is aimed at. It also shows this by the other articles that are including, such as the top 10 albums and release dates, which would also be appealing to their age groups because of what they are interested in. So used a boost to be included on the front cover, which would be appealing to the social group. I included a boost on the front cover for festival tickets and a competition to win an iPod. My magazine was not aimed at the male or female audience, so included stories that would be an interest to both gender rather than focusing on one. This allowed for my magazine to include more articles which the readers would want. This is shown on the contents page. This then represented the indie magazine that I was making my magazine for, and the research that I'd done shown this in my questionnaires. Question 3. The media institution and publisher that I would use for my media magazine would be IPC Media. This is because they are one of the biggest media companies in the UK and publish one of the UK's biggest music magazines, NME. One reason I chose to use IPC Media to publish my magazine is because on their website it says, IPC Media is a leading content provider for today's man, providing products with multiple contact points to connect with and influence the 18 to 34-year-old male. From this, it shows that they have a lot of knowledge for the magazines and the age group my magazine was aimed at. I would use them also to sell the magazines that it was aimed for, indie, but also because they sell magazines for the same age group and social group. Considering that they are the biggest selling UK publisher, I would know that they would have a lot of experience in the UK and would have a lot of understanding in the industry. With them being so well known, they would also be able to help me with the marketing of my products, as they are so experienced within the specific media product. The main sellers for my media product would be the big UK chain supermarkets. This is as I would be able to sell my product in mass production and would be able to sell it to a wide audience across the UK easily. I would also use the relatively new way of selling my magazine using e-books. This was use the internet to sell my magazine and would be an easy way for the consumer to get my magazine quickly. This would make it easier for the younger audience to get my magazine, as they spend a lot of their time on the internet. Question 4. The audience for my media product would be a teenager or young adults from the ages of 14 to 25. This would also be people who are interested in the indie music genre. I chose this age group as from my research I could see that this was the age group that was most interested in the indie music. I could also see that the gender of the magazine needed to include both females and males articles, as this is what other magazines used, and it's what I gathered from my research. The audience for my magazine was shown from the use of images that was used throughout my magazine. The research also shown that I needed to keep the cost of the magazine low so it would be affordable for all of the audience. Question 5. I addressed the audience towards my magazine by using popular images of the latest artists. This was accompanied by the headline of an exclusive interview with them. This allowed my target audience to be attracted to my magazine just by looking at the front cover. I also used a sell line at the bottom of my magazine with the line Arctic Monkeys album revealed, which would attract the younger audience which the band would be most popular with, which would then sell my magazine to the target audience it was made for. I also attracted my intended audience by using a bold masthead font on my front cover. This allowed for the audience to quickly see the magazine title if it was being sold on a shelf in a supermarket. I also mixed the colours from a typical indie magazine so that the magazine that I had created would stand out from the rest. This allowed the magazine to quickly establish the difference between each type of magazines. Another simple way that I attracted the audience was the price of my magazine. From the survey and research that I did to my target audience was that the price of my magazine needed to stay low so that it would be competitive with other magazines. So, to attract my target audience, I made sure that the price of my magazine was low and easy to buy for the younger audiences. The age of the artist also attracted the audience to my magazine, as they would be the same age as the target audience that I had chosen. This would attract them to my magazine as they would be able to relate to what the artist is saying, as they are the same age. On my contents page to attract my audience, I made sure to include a wide range of articles so that my magazine would be attractive to both sexes rather than one. If the articles didn't attract both audiences, I also included a regular feature that would always be in the media magazine. This would be good for the audience as it would never leave the magazine. This also included a simple layout so that it would be easy for the audience to read the contents of the magazine, but also keep to the house style that I had chosen to use. This also included small information about the double page spread. My double page spread attracted my audience with the unique pictures that I included in the middle of my page, which was surrounding the interview article. With the unique images of the artists on the bench, it challenged usual media conventions of an artist's interview of them talking to the camera or looking into the camera. In doing this, it added a unique look to the magazine which would be interesting to my audience. It also stuck to the house style colours of red, black and white, which allowed the audience to easily associate back to the magazine. I did this by including page numbers and the date of the article. The placement of the pull quotes also engaged the audience as it allowed them to quickly look at the article and decide if they wanted to continue reading it. By doing all of this on one page, it allowed my magazine to stand out against others whilst also keeping a house style with a unique look. During the making of my media product, I've used many different pieces of computer software and learnt new ways to use these pieces of software. When I first started to research and analyse other media products, we used WordPress. This was new software to me, and during this project I have learnt how to use WordPress to blog about my project. I have learnt how to keep an up-to-date diary entry on how my project had progressed and how I had improved my work. I also learnt how to use the screenshot feature to show how my product had progressed. Whilst using WordPress, I also learnt how to use Photoshop to manipulate images and create each part of a magazine. I learnt how to use layers so that the images could show differently against backgrounds, whilst also considering the effects the font had between each page, such as serif and sans serif fonts. When making my product, I also learnt how to create different effects to photos that I had taken. This could be used to improve some of my images. By doing this, I could add more colour to the image to make the person stand out more. I also learnt how to remove selected parts of an image so that they were not included in the end photo. At the start of making the project, I didn't know how to use Photoshop, but from this project I now know how to use individual tools from this software to make my product better. I also learned how to use Adobe InDesign to make my double page spread. This was something that I had never used before and learnt using tutorials from teachers and from the internet. This was new software that I had never used before, and it was good to try out other uses of software to make a better finished product. I also used new hardware as well as software when making the product, such as the digital camera. This was used throughout the making of my magazine so that I could get the correct image for my magazine, which took multiple attempts to get the correct one. This needed to be used properly so that the image looked to a high standard for my final product. Question 7. Looking at my preliminary task, I have learnt how to use Photoshop so that I could make a media magazine. From my preliminary task, I can see that the layout of the magazine was very basic, and with my final magazine the layout is very complex and looks like a typical magazine that would be sold in a supermarket. I also learnt that the colours and the house style that is included in the magazine are important, as it keeps the style of the magazine consistent throughout and connects each page to the next. I've also learnt from the project that the research that I did at the start of magazine is important, as it starts as a base to what your product needs to be towards the audience and what will be appealing to them and make them want to buy the magazine.